public is conditioned to fear the kinetic strike, the missile launch, the tank column. This is a calculated misdirection. While the media fixates on celebrity commentary, the strategic calculus has shifted from kinetic cost to systemic paralysis. Hardening legacy assets has become a vector for economic exhaustion. The Pentagon's $228 million contract for Iron Fist systems on Bradley vehicles is not a sign of strength. It is a receipt for strategic bankruptcy. It documents an unsustainable financial model, spending billions to defend assets that can be neutralized for a fraction of the cost. The true vector is silence. The goal is not a rubble-strewn city, but a dead screen. A single low-cost cyber attack, analogous to the Sandworm Group's attempt on Poland's power system, doesn't need to destroy a grid. It only needs to sever the digital nervous system of a nation-state. RUSI and CSIS assessments are clear. The primary asymmetric targets are not carrier groups, but the two assets that give them utility. First, the undersea fiber optic cables that function as the global economy's central nervous system. Second, the orbital satellites that provide the eyes and ears for every advanced weapon. This protocol creates the blind Leviathan, a state with overwhelming kinetic power, rendered inert. A multi-trillion-dollar military apparatus, suddenly deaf and sightless. Its launch on warning systems are useless because there is no warning. The objective is not destruction, but a systemic solvency crisis, where the Leviathan is strategically bankrupt, powerful, but paralyzed. The motive for this strategic pivot is not ideology, it is insolvency. A nation-state does not wage a kinetic war it expects to lose. The initial action is an investment, a violent form of hostile takeover. When the target does not capitulate, the balance sheet turns negative. The expenditure in assets and political capital exceeds the projected return. This is the definition of a solvency crisis. Analysts at RUSI and CSIS have documented this precise mechanism in Russia. The extended kinetic campaign becomes a massive domestic liability. It is an unpopular war, not on moral grounds, but on economic grounds. It drains the treasury and depletes the nation's most valuable assets. The state is, for all strategic purposes, bankrupt in the conventional domain. This weakness forces a pivot. A state facing strategic bankruptcy does not surrender. It changes the rules of the game. It abandons the high-cost chessboard of conventional warfare for the low-cost go-board of asymmetric attacks. This is not a choice. It is a mathematical certainty driven by an empty coffer. We see the blueprint in execution. The attempted cyber attack on Poland's power system, attributed to the Sandworm Group, is not a random act of aggression. It is a low-cost, high-leverage operation designed to inflict systemic damage that bypasses expensive defenses. The kinetic cost is near zero. The potential economic liability for the target is astronomical. Simultaneously, the West is trapped in a symmetrically expensive response. The Pentagon's $228 million contract for the Iron Fist system on Bradley vehicles is a case study. This is the cost to harden just one type of legacy asset. The attacker's cost is negligible. The defender's cost is systemic and unsustainable. This forces the defender into their own solvency crisis, completing the cycle. The core of the strategic liability is a simple, brutal equation. The Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, documents this with terrifying clarity. A conventionally superior power invests $5 million in a main battle tank. The challenger invests $500 in a first-person view drone. This is not warfare, it is an economic liquidation. The drone is not primarily a kinetic weapon, it is a financial instrument designed to bankrupt the asset holder. The math does not lie. The response to this asymmetric cost is never symmetrical. It is an accelerant to bankruptcy. To defend against the $500 threat, legacy assets require systemic and prohibitively expensive upgrades. The Pentagon's contract for the Iron Fist Active Protection System is a perfect case study. A $228 million program just to begin retrofitting Bradley fighting vehicles. For every dollar the attacker spends on a disposable asset, the defender must spend thousands on a non-guaranteed defense. This is a systemic solvency trap. This economic vector is driven by a principle analysts call the democratization of violence, the capacity to deliver strategic, kinetic, or systemic effects, like the Sandworm Group's cyber attacks on Poland's power grid, is no longer the monopoly of state-level actors. It has been decentralized. A small team with commercial technology can now achieve what once required an Air Force or a carrier strike group, imposing massive defensive costs on a nation's critical infrastructure for a fraction of the price. This isn't a mistake, it's a feature of modern conflict. The result is a national balance sheet under permanent siege. When the kinetic cost to defend every legacy asset and harden every grid node becomes mathematically unsustainable, a nation enters a solvency crisis. Its conventional superiority becomes its primary economic liability. This is the terminal phase where established deterrence protocols fail. As documented in publications like War on the Rocks, the strategic community is no longer treating nuclear proliferation as taboo, but as a rational, asymmetric response to pending strategic bankruptcy. The map you are shown is a lie. The kinetic hotspots are a distraction. The real war is fought in the gray zone, stable allied nations used as proxy laboratories to calibrate economic collapse. This is not a failure of security. It is a feature of the system. Analysts at CSIS define this as fourth-generation warfare. Forget tank battles. The primary vector is the low-cost, high-impact asymmetric attack. A recent attempt by the Sandworm Group to cripple Poland's power system is the blueprint. The kinetic cost to the attacker is near zero. The defensive cost to the target is systemic. The response protocol is a mathematical liability. To harden a single legacy asset, like the Bradley fighting vehicle, costs hundreds of millions. The Pentagon's recent $228 million contract for Iron Fist active protection systems is a single data point on an exponential curve. Now calculate the cost to harden an entire nation's power grid, its water supply, its financial system. The math does not lie. When the cost of defense trends toward infinity, the solvency of the state itself is the target. While legacy media channels air distractions about celebrity political commentary, the systemic economic attack continues, unobserved. These gray zones are not the source of instability. They are the staging grounds. RUSI reports confirm that tactics proven effective in these labs, destabilizing supply chains, testing cyber vulnerabilities, provoking social division, are then scaled and deployed against core powers. It is an economic siege by 1,000 cuts. This forced solvency crisis is the final lever. It is designed to make conventional superiority an economic suicide pact. The objective is to corner allied nations where the unthinkable becomes rational. A report in War on the Rocks openly questions if it is time for a Nordic nuke. This is not speculation. It is the predictable, asymmetric response to strategic bankruptcy. The Launch on Warning Protocol, as defined by strategic analysts at CSIS, is a remnant of a symmetric two-player game. The protocol is simple. Upon detection of an inbound strategic missile launch, a retaliatory kinetic strike is authorized immediately. This is not a choice. It is a pre-authorized, automated response protocol to prevent decapitation. The systemic liability emerges when the detection systems themselves become the primary battlefield. The recent attempted cyber attack on Poland's power system by the Sandworm Group is the blueprint. That same vector, when applied to early warning radar and satellite networks, creates what military planners call the fog of digital war. When the screens go dark, the commander is not blind. They are tortured. They are forced to decide if the signal loss is a technical glitch or the opening salvo of a decapitation strike. In that vacuum, with seconds to decide, fear of annihilation forces the decision. The protocol demands a launch. This is not an error. It is a design trap, forcing a kinetic response to a digital event. The cost to defend ratio is the only metric that matters. While legacy media broadcasts celebrity commentary from the 2025 SAG Awards, state actors are stress-testing Western solvency. The recent attempted cyber attack on Poland's power system by the Sandworm Group was not an isolated incident. It was a rangefinder. For every dollar an adversary spends on a disruptive cyberkinetic probe, a conventionally superior power must spend thousands on hardening legacy assets. The U.S. Army's $228 million contract for Elbit's Iron Fist systems on Bradley vehicles is a single data point in a systemic liability approaching mathematical certainty. This is not defense. It is a liquidity drain. This forced spending creates a solvency crisis for allied nations who see their conventional guarantees eroding under the weight of asymmetric economic warfare. The result, as highlighted in strategic journals like War on the Rocks, is the normalization of previously unthinkable options. The question, is it time for a Nordic nuke, is no longer academic. It is a line item in a national security budget. CSIS analysts project the next phase will be a calibration shot against U.S. infrastructure within 10 months. The target will be a Tier 2 maritime logistics hub, likely the port of Savannah. A coordinated, multi-vector attack will trigger a 72-hour shutdown of all crane and container processing systems. The event will be engineered for plausible deniability, attributed to a defunct hacktivist collective to measure economic shock and FEMA response time without crossing a kinetic threshold.